Hi there, everyone, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's November 16th. Today, we'll celebrate the man known as the Pansy King, and we'll also learn about the Anglo-Australian botanist who first described much of the eucalyptus genus. We'll remember the American botanist who had a favorite plant that he liked to use in the study of heredity, and it wasn't peas. We'll salute one of America's most popular naturalists, and we grow that garden library with a book about one of my favorite gardeners. And ironically, she went by the name Bunny. And then we'll wrap things up with the woman who introduced the dahlia to England. Now, before we get to all of that, I want to share a few housekeeping items and then today's curated article. First, I want to remind you that you can head on over to thedailygardener.org. That's the website for the podcast. And when you're there, be sure to sign up for the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. That's a newsletter that comes out every Friday with a personal update from me. So you'll get to see some pictures of my garden or my houseplants, things of that nature. I include garden-related items for your calendar, some things that you might need a little reminder for. I will also share the complete list of the Grow That Garden Library books that are featured during the week. And I'll also include some gardener gift ideas. 'Tis the season, and sometimes it's difficult to come up with gifts for gardeners. So I've got you covered there. I'll share some garden-inspired recipes, and then I'll also include some exclusive updates regarding the show and more. And again, you can sign up for the newsletter over at the website, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, feel free to go through the different tabs that I've set up to cover aspects of the show. There's a tab for botanical history that has all of the individual botanists that I've shared on the show. There's a tab for book recommendations that takes care of all the book recommendations on the show. And then there's also a section for unearthed words that covers journal entries and poetry that I share on the show. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I'd encourage you to do so. Again, the website is thedailygardener.org. For today's curated news, I'm sharing an original blog post that I wrote over on the website, and it's called Revisiting Garden Dreams. And it's based on this quote that I read by Ruskin Bond. He's an Indian writer, a children's author, and a novelist. And this quote is from his book called Rain in the Mountains, Notes from the Himalayas. He wrote, "Yes, I'd love to have a garden of my own, spacious and full of everything that is fragrant and flowering. But if I don't succeed, never mind. I've still got the dream." Well, this quote inspired me to write a post about the gap between the gardens that we experience in reality and the garden of our dreams. Now, some years, we actually come very close to achieving the garden of our dreams. We get a burst of energy. We have extra room in our budget. And those years can be particularly satisfying. But this post also discusses what happens when we don't accomplish our garden dreams, or even worse, when we forget about them entirely. Have you ever had the experience where you get up in the morning after you've just had this wonderful dream all night long, and then you suddenly can't remember it? Is there anything more aggravating? Well, the same thing can happen with our gardens. And that's what this post is about. Again, it's called Revisiting Garden Dreams, and it's over on the Daily Gardener website. Now, if you'd like to check out any of my curated news articles or original blog posts for yourself, you can also find them in the listener community. It's the free Facebook group that I've created for the show, and it's called the Daily Gardener Community. So again, you never have to take notes or search for links. If you hear something on the show and you want to read more about it, you can either go to the website or the next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the anniversary of the death of the Swiss-born naturalist, florist, and plant breeder, Dennis Zirngiebel. After marrying his wife, Henrietta, Dennis emigrated to America. Now, once he established a home in Needham, Massachusetts, Dennis sent for his wife and his little boy. Dennis and Henrietta had 4 children. Their only daughter, also named Henrietta, married Andrew Newell Wyeth, and their son was N.C. Wyeth, the realistic painter. During the 1860s, Dennis worked for the Arnold Arboretum at Harvard University. After purchasing a 35-acre tract of land along the Charles River in Needham, Dennis started his floral business. An excellent businessman, Dennis expertly marketed his inventory. Each week, he shipped flowers to both the White House and the State Department. And in a nod to his Swiss heritage, Dennis was the first person in America to cultivate the giant Swiss pansy successfully. Dennis's Needham nursery grew so many giant Swiss pansies that the town adopted the flower as their floral emblem, and Dennis became known as the Pansy King. And it was on this day in 1925 that the botanist Joseph Henry Maiden died. Born in London, Joseph emigrated to New South Wales, Australia, hoping that the climate would improve his health. Joseph quickly landed a job as a museum curator in Sydney, and he also married a local woman named Eliza Jane Hammond. During his time in Australia, Joseph made a significant contribution to the understanding of Australian flora, especially the eucalyptus genus. After thoroughly studying Australian woods and essential oils, Joseph wrote his book called The Useful Native Plants of Australia. In 1896, Joseph was appointed the director of the Sydney Botanic Gardens. In total, Joseph served as a botanist in Australia for 43 years. As for his Australian legacy, Joseph is remembered every September 1st, which is the first day of spring in Australia, and it's also known as Wattle Day or Acacia Day. The wattle in Australia is a common name for the acacia. After appreciating their beauty and value, Joseph established the Wattle Day League, which fought to make the golden wattle, the Acacia pycnantha, Australia's national floral emblem. And he also worked to establish Wattle Day. Since the inception of Wattle Day in 1909, Australians have worn a wattle blossom, which looks a little like a yellow pom-pom, in honor of the day. The wattle blossom is also a favorite with pollinators. As plants, wattles are tough evergreen shrubs and trees that can withstand Australia's droughts, winds, and bushfires. There are 760 wattle species native to Australia's forest understory, woodlands, and open scrub. The common name wattle refers to an old Germanic term for weaving and the English craft of building with interwoven, flexible twigs and branches. As the English settled in Australia, they often harvested the wattle and used it in their building construction. And here's a fun fact about wattles. Giraffes love to eat them. And today is the anniversary of the death of the prominent American botanist and geneticist, Albert Francis Blakeslee, who died on this day, November 16th, 1954. For his doctoral dissertation, Albert revealed incredible new facts about bread molds. Bread molds can be male or female, and bread molds have sex. In 1937, Albert proved that colchicine caused chromosomes to double in plant cells, causing an outcome known as polyploidy. For plant breeders, polyploidy results in increased plant vigor and overall superiority. In addition to his work with fungi and colchicine, Albert studied the genetics of weeds. Albert was especially fond of the very poisonous and rank-smelling Jimson weed, or Datura stramonium. One of Albert's friends once remarked that Albert had two great loves, his wife Margaret and Datura, in that order. Datura is commonly called the thorn apple or the devil's apples, which gives a clue to Datura as a nightshade plant, since nightshades were historically thought to be evil. The American lyrical poet and playwright Edna St. Vincent Millay threw some shade at Datura in her poem, In the Grave No Flowers, writing, "Hear the rank-smelling thorn apple, and who would plant this by his dwelling?" Well, Edna's verse upset Albert, and he sent her a letter saying, "I thought I would write to you and answer your question by saying that I would plant this by my dwelling and have done so for the last 30 years rather extensively." It turns out that this plant, Datura stramonium, is perhaps the very best plant with which to discover the principles of heredity. A highly invasive plant, the Algonquin Indians and other ancient peoples regarded Datura as a shamanistic plant and smoked it to induce intoxication and hallucinations or visions. And the name Datura is from an early Sanskrit word meaning divine inebriation. Now, Datura's common name, Jimson weed, is derived from Jamestown's colonial settlement, where British soldiers were given a salad made with boiled Jamestown weed or Jimson weed. For days after eating the greens, instead of quelling the colonial uprising known as the Bacon Rebellion, the British soldiers turned fools, blowing feathers in the air, running about naked, and acting entirely out of their minds. In unearthed words, today is the anniversary of the death of the Harvard botanist, naturalist, Washington Post nature columnist, and author Donald Culross Peatti, who died at the age of 66 on this day, November 16th, 1964. During his lifetime, Donald Peatti was regarded as the most read nature writer in America. Donald had an older brother named Roderick, who was a geographer and an essayist. Of his younger brother Donald, Roderick once wrote, "My young brother Donald was very skinny and quite philosophical. He took every faith but theosophy. He had a wonderful memory and a love of beauty, which still marks his life. Doubtless he was a genius, but I thought him a pest." Here are some quotes by Donald Culross Peatti. "Winter is a study in half tones. and one must have an eye for them or go lonely. And here's one about limber pines. Limber pines have a way of growing in dramatic places, taking picturesque attitudes, and getting themselves photographed, written about, and cared for. And here's Donald Peatti's definition of a hummingbird. A hummingbird is a feathered prism, a living rainbow. It captures the very sunlight. And finally, here are Donald Peatti's thoughts on the white oak. If the oak is king of trees, then the white oak is king of kings. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Gardens of Bunny Mellon by Linda Jane Holden. This book came out in 2018, and it is absolutely gorgeous and should be. Every page is Bunny Mellon. When she was alive, Rachel Bunny Mellon's greatest love was garden design. Her husband, Paul Mellon, was one of America's wealthiest men. Together, Bunny and Paul maintained 5 homes in New York, Cape Cod, Nantucket, Antigua, and Upperville, Virginia. In addition to designing the gardens for all of her homes, Bunny designed gardens for some of her closest friends, including the Rose Garden and the East Garden at the White House and the home of Hubert Givenchy. These gardens are all featured in Linda's beautiful book. In the book, Linda thoughtfully includes Bunny's garden plans, sketches, and watercolors, which I found fascinating, along with old photographs of Oak Spring, the Mellon estate in Upperville. And Linda had the gift of conducting extensive interviews with Bunny before she died in 2014, which gives her book an increased feeling of insight and authenticity. This book is 308 pages of Bunny Mellon and her gardens, and it really belongs in any serious garden library. You can get a copy of The Gardens of Bunny Mellon by Linda Jane Holden and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $35. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the anniversary of the death of the English political hostess and flower lover Elizabeth Fox, also known as the Baroness Holland, who died on this day, November 16th, 1845. When she was 15, Elizabeth married Sir Godfrey Webster, who was 20 years her senior. After having 5 children in 6 years, Elizabeth began an affair with a Whig politician named Henry Fox, the 3rd Baron Holland, and she even had a child by him. 2 days after divorcing Godfrey, Elizabeth quickly married Henry, and together they had 6 more children. A domineering woman to her husband and her children, and a zealous socialite, Elizabeth is remembered for introducing the dahlia to England. In 1804, the botanist Antonio Jose Cavanilles gave seed from the Dahlia pinnata to Elizabeth during her trip to Madrid's Royal Botanic Gardens. Once she returned to England, Elizabeth's dahlia was successfully cultivated in her gardens at Holland House. 20 years after Elizabeth brought the dahlia to England, her husband Henry included these words in a little love note. "The dahlia you brought to our isle, your praises forever shall speak, mid gardens as sweet as your smile, and in color as bright as your cheek." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life. Garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.